that 50 basis points is what the market's pricing in. I think that's a no-brainer for next week. My guess is that they'll go to 25 basis point hike after that. And again, I'm looking at the symmetry of what they did, right? When they started raising rates, they started with a 25, they went to 50, then they had 475 hikes, and now they're kind of coming down the mountain on the other side with a 50 and likely 25. And I think by the end of the first quarter of 2023, they're basically not hiking anymore. But the kicker is they're not going to be cutting rates either. And I think that's going to be the shock for the market. So 50 is already, we saw that little rally off of the 50, kind of the guiding to 50, and then you're going to look for 25. And the market is going to like that as long as the economic data doesn't start falling off a cliff.
Right.
All right. If we start to get to that point where bad news is actually bad news, because remember, right now, bad news has been good news because it means that the Fed is less likely to hike when you get that bad news. It means the economy is slowing, so they're not going to raise rates as much. But if we get into that next period where you see bad news starting to become bad news again, then I actually think that it doesn't matter. The market will realize that the Fed's not going to cut rates, and bad news means we're slipping into a recession with no bailout from the Federal Reserve.
All right.
I think in general a pivot would be pivoting back down and cutting rates. So I think initially what we're seeing now is them just backing down a little bit. And even when they're not raising anymore, that wouldn't be the pivot yet. I don't think that I think even when the Fed cuts rates, the market could be in such poor shape. And by the way, I think it's going to be well over a year before the Fed cuts rates. Let's be fair on that. Even in a recession that gets ugly, I think you're going to see a long period of time before the Fed has the guts to do it. Because remember, the Fed was all about transitory. They really got egg on their face in that situation. And they're going to be very careful about creating that same inflationary pressure, right? And if you think about it, right, who benefited the most from asset prices going up? Well, the wealthy. And who got hurt the most from inflation? The poor. And so I think there's this big kind of thing about they don't want to be viewed as the ones that are catering to the rich. And so they're going to be very careful with inflation. Okay. So my guess is they already overstepped on the hikes. And I think the Fed falls into that same category of being humans. They saw their mistake with saying transitory. Now they felt like they had to pound their chest and kind of reverse. They overdid it the other way. This is a history of the Fed, by the way. They always do this. They kind of overshoot each direction. So I think at this stage, they're going to be very reluctant after being burned on the transitory side to then go back to printing. And I think they'll err on the side of caution. We know that in the 70s and 80s, this was an issue. They started to reduce rates too quickly, and then inflation took off again. And I think Jerome Powell has said very clearly that that's an issue. And I think you have to look at, the fact of who gets hurt with inflation versus who gets hurt with higher asset prices or who benefits. And so I would be very shocked if, it'll be in 2024 before they lower interest rates, in my opinion.
Okay.